ladies and gentlemen, let's now put the spotlight on this big developments that's emerging in the Russia-Ukraine war. The United States has paused some weapons shipments to Ukraine, citing low stockpiles as Russia intensifies its attacks. The Pentagon's move, prioritizing American interests, comes as President Trump pushes for a ceasefire. Ukraine warns that this could embolden Russia, while Moscow claims that it may hasten the war's end. So the big question is this a strategic shift by Donald Trump to force peace talks, or does it risk Ukraine's defense? To discuss that and more, now joined by Swaminathan Aiyar. He's a consulting editor at ET Now. Thank you very much, Swami sir. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi.
So my first question to you is, how might this suspension impact Ukraine's political stability and military capabilities, especially even as Russia is making territorial gains?
At this point, I mean, every country in a war is fighting out of stops. So if the United States has stops, it does not mean that the Ukrainians will run out of weapons in a day or even a week. So let us see. Mr. Trump has a way of changing his mind every second day. I am not clear at this particular point what his aim is. It is certainly not the case that Zelensky is insisting on continuing on the war, or that Russia wants to is keen on a ceasefire. In fact, we've just heard that the largest ever number of drones have been used by Russia against Zelensky in the last few days. So in these conditions, it is very far from clear what Trump is trying to do. I would also add that the Europeans, to the extent they can, are giving full support to Zelensky. So it's not that, I mean, even if Russia doesn't, it is not as though they will be deprived totally of any supplies. They will get supplies from the other party. Key question is, does he have a proposal which both sides will accept? At this point of time, Russia has the advantage. I mean, it has the men, it has the arms, it has the money. Can it continue with the war if it feels like it? And the answer is yes. And again, Putin has said that I want the whole of Ukraine, whether it's a negotiating position or not. So at this point of time, when Trump wants to have a quick deal, whether he has the ability to do so by these various tactics is far from clear. Let us see what happens. I have a feeling that this is just a short-term tactic. Beyond that, he has given a number of threats to countries like India that have been buying Soviet crude oil, and to China buying Soviet crude oil. I think by now Indians have diversified, but there can be no question that there is a very, very large gray market. And there are ships which nobody really knows where they are from, which are supplying oil through various chains. I supply to you, and then a ship lands up in India. So let us see. I think the Indian importers are going to be careful at this point of time not to be tempted just by the low price of Russian oil on the gray market. That may put a little more pressure on Mr. Putin. Right. I hope so. I mean, we would all want a ceasefire and some kind of resolution on Ukraine. The problem right now is that Putin is on a very strong wicket. What does he have to lose if he continues? That's the real problem, and let us see whether there is any way out of that.
Correct. Correct, sir. But let's talk a bit more about Trump's, strategy with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war. In the past, when he assumed office, he showed a lot of enthusiasm regarding halting this war within days. But now it seems that his patience seems to be wearing thin. But what you've seen from the United States, is this necessarily indicating a shift in the U.S. policy when it comes to Ukraine and Russia? So when you say that how it remains to be seen how a deal will be arrived at, do you want to throw a bit more light on that aspect, on this changed U.S. policy, perhaps, towards Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, all I can say is that he keeps shifting. So he was, first of all, extremely, extremely rude to Mr. Zelensky when he went over to the USA. And they said, you have to apologize and behave properly and thank us more, which they did. And then later on, when the Russians were not giving in, he declared that Putin is mad, Putin is stupid. And very funny, the Russians reacted by saying, we don't take this seriously. So they could see the acting. So at this point, he is acting like he has always acted. And he claims that in deal making, you say various things in order to prepare yourself for the final. So at this point, I would say we don't know what his tactics are. He wants a ceasefire. That is clear. How does he push both sides into a ceasefire? That is not clear. And he may once again call Putin mad day after tomorrow. We don't know. So let us see what happens. At this point of time, I would simply say nobody is taking Trump seriously on any one statement because he keeps changing. So when he begins to show a more clear-cut, coherent line, I think then we will say this is what Trump wants to do. At this point of time, people say, yawn, don't take it too seriously. He may go back on this tomorrow. Wait and see whether there is a cogent line. Then we will know where he's actually going.
Right, sir. But, disruption and confusion, if I may say that, that's been Donald Trump's policy as far as this administration is concerned. And of course, there is another story that's brewing in the United States, India, US trade deal. He's made a lot of flip-flops on that. He's made a lot of flip-flops on other matters. But I'll come to that point towards the end of this conversation. But let's now focus back to this conversation. And I want to still understand from you, when the United States actually decides to curb the transfer of some weapons, what's behind this selective suspension?
He has said he's going to do this again and again. It is not the first time he has said this. At the very first time he said, I'm going to do nothing at all. I mean, this is before Zelensky landed up. And then some of it was resumed, and then it was partial. So, I will merely say that it is like his statements on tariffs as well. Suddenly initially the stock market would react violently to a statement. Now he keeps making different statements. The stock market said, just relax. No, this guy is not to be taken seriously until we get to the final blow. So right now it is undoubtedly true that Washington wants a ceasefire. Washington wants a resolution. Washington wants an out from constant supply of money and arms and other things. It does not want to continue. At the same time, he wants to claim a victory on stopping the war. And how he is going to stop Putin, it is unclear right now. He is trying very hard on the oil. Actually, Biden was the one who tightened the screws. And now it's going to be much more difficult for Russia to sell oil. But the way the war is going at this point, I do not see that Russia can be stopped in its tracks right now by further sanctions on oil or other things. So all we can say is that we are in a ferment of not knowing what is going to happen. It is difficult almost to think that, Trump has only been about 100 days in office. It seems such a long time since he stirred the pot and everybody began to wonder what is he going to do on board. So I would say that he certainly wants to reduce his commitments to Ukraine. He wants to combine that, however, with greater sanctions and forcing Putin to the negotiating table. And nobody really knows how this is going to happen or on whose terms. Zelensky's real fear is that, Russia will say, okay, we have a ceasefire. They have a ceasefire, then they mass all their guys, and day after tomorrow, once again, they attack. What will Trump do? After all these sanctions, if Russia has not given way, what is the additional thing he's going to do? So I would say Russia at this point is in the driver's seat.
Right, sir.
And what Trump is doing right now is not serious.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, it'll be interesting to see how Ukraine will recalibrate its military and diplomatic strategy in response to the suspension. But, sir, I'll have to interrupt here, given the fact that we're receiving some breaking news that's just coming in. Well, just a week ahead of the July 9th deadline, Donald Trump, the U.S. president, has announced a trade deal with Vietnam. Trump says, I made a trade deal with Vietnam. The details of the deal with follow. So that's pretty significant that this deal has been signed with Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, the agreement was unveiled less than a week before the 90-day pause, the relief period on 90-day pause that comes to an end on July the 9th. In fact, we're given to understand from several reports that under the protectionist trade scheme, Vietnamese imports to the United States were subject to a 46% blanket tariff. It's not immediately clear what the tariffs are, if any, Vietnam would be facing under the yet to be detailed trade deal with the United States. This is breaking news, and of course, we will be bringing in more updates. Swami, sir, your initial thoughts and your comments on this trade deal that the United States has signed with Vietnam. There were some differences with Vietnam. There were differences with Japan as well. So the Japanese deal, that hasn't been signed. That's not been announced. But this one coming through with Vietnam.
Okay. It's not just Vietnam. He's anxious to come and announce a number of deals before July 9th. In fact, at one point of time, he said, I'm going to announce 90 deals, which I very much doubt, given the very few number of days left and the way Japan and the European Union have dug their heels in and say we are not ready. But he is desperately keen to announce a victory. Just like, in the Indo-Pak conflict that we had recently, he's dying to announce that, I have brought about peace and I want a Nobel Prize. So he's dying to announce a number of victories. He's done it with Vietnam. He's close to having an interim deal, if not a full deal, with India. He will have similar kinds of things with her. So he wants to be able to announce by July 9th a number of victories on trade. So let us see on what terms those are being made. What is clear, I think, at this point is that neither Japan nor the European Union says that we are so afraid of you that we are going to give in. They are saying that we are going to continue and we have very serious problems with your proposals. We are not going to keel under. So those two biggest trading partners, they are not going to cave under. And if they continue, then in some sense, it's a sign to India and others. Why are you caving in? I have long said, the one thing I couldn't understand is that we gave up the Google tax with getting nothing in return. Even before all this started, what did you get? And some people said, it's like putting sugar inside the other guy's mouth, that this kind of thing, they will be in a more happy mood. I'm sorry, that's a stupid strategy, as the Japanese have shown, as the Europeans have shown. So I really think, we should be tough and hold out. You see, our strength is that because we are short of oil and gas, we can claim among the very few countries that we are going to shrink our trade deficit with the USA.
Right.
In most other countries, including Vietnam, I see it very difficult that the trade deficit will come down. But India can offer that because of our need for oil and gas.
Absolutely.
So that, once you put that in, even as an interim thing, he can claim partial victory.
Right, sir. So it's very interesting that you talk about the fact that, countries need to perhaps stand up to Donald Trump's tariff tactics and, of course, this strategy of pressurizing countries into bowing down to the United States and, of course, agreeing the terms and conditions that the United States set. But, from the messaging that Donald Trump has put out on his social media platform, he says that Vietnam will pay the United States a 20% tariff on any or all goods sent into our territory and a 40% tariff on transshipping. In return, Vietnam will be doing something that they have never done before: give the United States of America total access to their markets for trade. In other words, he says that they will open their market to the United States. How do you read Donald Trump's comments that he's just posted on Truth Social? And does it indicate that Vietnam has caved in?
Vietnam was certainly open to saying there'll be zero duty on U.S. goods. The plain and simple fact is that they import very little from the USA. And if that comes in on zero duty, they're perfectly happy to import a little more from the USA. Trump's problem is that the USA is uncompetitive on most items. So, if they say that import duty on cars comes down to zero, how many American companies are going to be competitive compared with the Japanese, compared with the Koreans, compared even with the Europeans? So, the Vietnam was willing even earlier to say, we are willing to do a zero tariff. The key, one of the big things is Trump says that, all the Chinese goods are coming through you, and also the Chinese companies are investing in you, and they claim that this is a Vietnamese product, and it's not because the value added is so little. That is some of the most difficult parts, because Apple or various other people, they actually have investments in Vietnam. And if you say that, I will put this very, very high duty on you because you are shipping parts from China, then it would make things very difficult. There's a Chinese company called Jinko Solar, which made a huge investment in putting up solar panels. And suddenly it's faced with saying, because the value added is not enough, the Americans will threaten a very high number of a very high tariff. So let us see how that works out. The Vietnamese recognize that the United States is an important market. They have no problem in opening their market, and they will do what they can. I would simply say that in the history of all this, cheating always succeeds.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So in all likelihood, you are suggesting the fact that Vietnam might have opened up its economy to the United States, sir. But the bigger question is, since it's in our neighborhood, what's the likely impact on India because of the fact that we are competing with countries like China and Vietnam so far as manufacturing is concerned? And Vietnam happens to be a big manufacturing hub, especially for electronics and components and related industries.
India has not allowed Chinese companies to invest in India. So, the problem that the Chinese will be shifted to India and then go that is not an issue. What has been brought up as an issue is Apple, because Apple is importing components massively from China. And in India, all that we are doing is assembly. There is no serious manufacture of components. So he's saying that, India just adds 6% in value and moves it on. Why should I treat this as an Indian product? Why should I not treat this as a Chinese product? So I think that is the difficult area we have. But as I said, the advantage we have is this huge increase that we are able to see on oil and gas, which the other countries are not able to compete with us on that. Yes, China could also, if it gives up Russia, but China will not give up Russia. So I would say India is able to have a massive increase in its imports of oil and gas, and therefore it's in a position to say, I will massively reduce my trade deficit with you. If you look at the other countries, they will find it very difficult, because I do not think they're in a position to say they will have a massive increase in imports of energy. They will not be able to have a massive increase in exports of almonds, pistachio, and cashew, which the USA wants to do.
Right.
They all have sensitive agricultural sectors.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to open up their agricultural sectors.
Yes.
There is also the problem of America has genetically modified crops, in the case of soybean and in the case of maize, in the case of wheat. And they say that if we allow this in, then we will not be allowed to export to Europe, because Europe said that, your thing will be tainted with the genetically modified. So these are some of the problems.
Right. Right. And those are some of the challenges that are emerging with respect to India's negotiations with the United States. But, sir, a very interesting point that you made about this trade deal that the United States has with Vietnam and its impact on India, because we have some data, and in fact, we were given to understand from sources that when the United States announced these reciprocal tariffs on April the 2nd, Apple actually shipped iPads Max from countries like not just India, but also China and Vietnam. And Vietnam has, more zero duty tariff lines as compared to India. So the impact of that, particularly on the electronics segment, the electronics industry right here in India, that remains to be seen, and whether there will be any supply chain shifts so far as these two countries are concerned. But coming back to the India-US negotiations, do you think is a deal imminent, given the fact that, there's been a lot of back and forth. The stay of the chief negotiator has been extended in the United States. And of course, we did hear from the United States side as well that a deal is imminent that should come through this week. Would you agree with that? Do you think that a deal is imminent and should come in perhaps the next 2-3 days?
No, there is going to be action because Mr. Trump wants to announce victories. If he has said, I am going to do 90 deals, imagine how many how many deals he will attempt to do in the next week, a very large number. And he will want to use the numbers to create an impression of a major victory. So I said, without doubt, he is a stage actor who will attempt to show a very large number of victories, even where there are partial agreements, as may be the case with India. He will play that up. If with Vietnam there is zero import duty, he will play that up, even though Vietnam's imports are so small that it will not make a significant difference. So what we are seeing right now is, I mean, he's an excellent play actor. He's a performer on TV, he's a performer on the stage. He's using some of that, but he is not going to find it easy to get everybody to agree to his terms, even though he's trying. Above all, the current account deficit of the United States of America, he's treating the current account deficit as being a consequence of unfair trading by others. And in terms of economics, that is dead wrong. A current account deficit represents a shortage of money to finance your own investment. Therefore, you have to get the money from abroad. And the mirror image of that is a current account deficit. So, the plain and simple fact is that the Americans are spending too much compared with their own savings. And because of that, they run a trade deficit. It is not going to be put right by these so-called deals. So let us see, a year or two from now, and now, of course, we may say that the MAGA crowd, Trump supporters do not understand why a current account deficit should be equal to a savings investment gap, right? So he may get away with fooling a large number of them. But the fact is that that is not going to change. In fact, with this new budget package, the debt is going to increase even more, which means that the trade deficit overall may get bigger and not smaller. Let us see how Mr. Trump explains that to his supporters in the next 2 years.
Yes, to the MAGA crowd who've been supporting him, and of course that's your right, but it remains to be seen what kind of impact is this going to have on U.S. consumers. But sir, when it comes to negotiations that the United States is holding with India, and of course there are some tensions and some challenges that are coming up as far as the agri sector is concerned, dairy sector is concerned, is Donald Trump administration using agriculture as a prop to gain elsewhere? Because we've seen statements from the Donald Trump administration, whether it's related to the defense sector and having more deals with India on defense, or perhaps procuring more oil from the United States, and of course reducing those supplies from Russia.
Yeah, well, on oil, on oil, he is keen. And Modi says, absolutely. So, the fact that the two of them agree on such a large area has made the negotiation relatively easy. As far as agriculture is concerned, Mr. Trump knows that a very large number of the agricultural states in the United States, they are with him, they are backers of his. And they are all saying, what is going to happen to us? Because if you start putting up tariff barriers and there are retaliations, the retaliations will come on agriculture. So what you are doing is you are cutting our throat. So Mr. Trump is very keen on showing victories on agriculture to mollify the farm belt in the United States, which constitutes a solid backing for him. So he's going to push that. Others will push back. Japan has pushed back so conclusively. In India, the Jagran Manch, they are dead against agricultural imports. You saw the impact of the farmers against the reforms that was proposed a couple of years ago. In these circumstances, it's very difficult to see India giving way on agriculture. More than a thing, if you say import more pistachios, cashews, that we can do. Import more apples and pineapples, yes, that we can do. But if you get into the serious areas of, they say, import more corn, genetically modified, import more maize, import wheat, on those items, I just do not see India giving way at this stage. And that may hold up. That may hold up a final
And we
agreement.
do
That's why
hope that,
we're having an interim thing. But on the final, we are not close to any kind of deal. I don't think.
We're not close to any kind of deal. Well, sir, we'll have to see, wait and watch what happens before that deadline of July 9th and, what exactly happens post that deadline, what kind of agreements are made with respect to these two countries, what could India offer and what's likely to be protected. All of those things we'll have to wait and see on how they pan out with respect to India's negotiations with the United States. On that note, thank you very much, sir, once again, for joining us here on ET Now and sharing your perspectives.
Thank you.